It's a beautiful day to be going on sleigh rides. Here we go. Whoa! 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 Go! Slow down! Whoa! Oh my God! Whoa! Whoa! Let's do that again. Yeah! That's about right. My name's Timothy Chalamet. What? Did you just say my name is Timothy Chalamet? I hate to disappoint you, but my name is not Timothy.
And now for something completely different.
I've made it no secret in the past that I'm very fond of the imaginative works of Hayao Miyazaki. I mean, arguably, not every single film he's made was absolutely perfect, but Hayao Miyazaki is one of those filmmakers where even what could be considered his worst is better than a lot of modern Hollywood directors at their best. Hayao Miyazaki has earned his reputation as a master of animation. He has successfully implemented universal themes, combining them with Japanese folklore, Shinto mythology, and practicing what he preaches. He has earned the love of many people around the world, and I can't think of many people who can't bring themselves to not like Hayao Miyazaki. He's just that good of a filmmaker. Many of my favorite films ever made come from Studio Ghibli. Grave of the Fireflies by Isao Takahata, The Red Turtle by Michael van der Wyck, and especially Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away by Hayao Miyazaki, the latter of which I've made an entire video series analyzing the film. What I like about Hayao Miyazaki's films is that there's a unique, peaceful ambience to all his films. Miyazaki uses his vivid imagination to illustrate his points and his morals in ways that anybody can understand. And his films are also filled with so much depth that you get more out of it by watching those films again and again and again. And the themes are laid out in such a way that anyone of any age can look into and understand, whether you're young or old. There's always something appealing about Miyazaki that's worth looking into. And that's definitely worth admiring. So, naturally, Miyazaki has been around for generations, inspiring future generations of animators and inspiring generations of filmmakers. He's been around for so many generations that he's considered retiring, only to get back into animation again, only to retire, only to come back again, only to retire, only to come back again, only to retire for The Wind Rises, even making a full documentary, which I've reviewed in the past, called Kingdom of Dreams of Madness. Only to come back again! He has announced his retirement so many times. I can't trust his retirement announcements anymore. He said The Wind Rises was going to be his last film, but he came back again to make this film that I'm about to review. And people were saying, oh, perhaps The Boy and the Heron is going to be his last film. Nuh-uh. I am not trusting that. And lo and behold, my suspicions have proved correct. The Boy and the Heron is not his last film. He is working on another animated masterpiece as we speak. In fact, I would not be surprised even if Miyazaki died, he would have a secret film plan in his vaults or something. So, anyway, about The Boy and the Heron, what is this film all about? The story is an adaptation of a childhood favorite story of Hayao Miyazaki called How Do You Live? A part of me might be convinced that this story of The Boy and the Heron could potentially be a very loose adaptation because the Mahito, the boy character, ends up reading a book which is literally How Do You Live and is moved to tears from reading it, which is kind of a nice homage. So please let me know in the comments if this is meant to be a direct adaptation or a loose adaptation. But either way, The Boy and the Heron is nevertheless an adaptation of a Japanese story called How Do You Live? The story, as is presented in this movie, is set during the Pacific War during World War II. The movie begins with the boy Mahito having his mother unfortunately killed in a fire in a munitions factory. Mahito and his father move out to the countryside to live with a new partner who is pregnant. As the boy gets accustomed to the accommodations, he notices a very peculiar welcome from a very peculiar grey heron, who seems to be leading him towards this very peculiar European-esque tower. Miyazaki is very fond of European architecture. This tower seems to hold quite a lot of knowledge and a few particular secrets, and the boy Mahito is beginning to realize that this grey heron is no ordinary grey heron, and lo and behold, he notices the grey heron is talking to him and seems to have protruding teeth. The heron says that the boy seems to be a chosen one, and to make a long story short, the new pregnant partner goes missing, and the heron seems to be offering some vague indications that he knows where Mahito's mother is. So, in search of presumably both his mother figures, the heron guides the boy into the tower, which is apparently some kind of gateway into a fantastical spirit world, where the heron offers to be Mahito's guide.
I'll be your guide.
And so begins a unique, surreal adventure of self-discovery and dealing with grief. I could go on about the happenstances of the film and about the characters, but I'm not going to give too much away. I will say, this film, right off the gate, it's not Miyazaki's best film. I would say Hayao Miyazaki's best efforts would probably have to go to Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, arguably. Although, to be fair, I think The Boy and the Heron is one of those films that warrants another watch, just to fully comprehend the themes and the ideas that Miyazaki was trying to interpret to his audience. It might be a little bit troublesome for some, because one of my main critiques with this film, and my friend Brooks Gallinghouse, aka Squid Bear, would agree with me here, is the fact that there are certain plot reveals that kind of come out of the blue very sporadically. I mean, looking back, I suppose there may have been a few hints, but the actual reveals are very sporadic, and I wish there could have been more time to build up to the reveals. I think that would have made for a much more satisfying reveal. Yet, I would imagine there might be some people who would say The Boy and the Heron would definitely be superior to Ponyo, maybe Howl's Moving Castle as well, or I can imagine some people saying that. Take that as you will. So, despite The Boy and the Heron's apparent setbacks, I would still say this film is worth your time and investment just to understand the kind of themes that Miyazaki is trying to portray to his audience, because out of all the films that Hayao Miyazaki has made so far in his career, I'd say this film is the most overt in dealing with the themes of grief, the phases of grief, and what's known as the 5 phases of grief. Again, I might need to watch the film again in order to fully comprehend which parts of the film represent which parts of the stages of grief, but the elements of grief are definitely there in the film, and you can definitely see it. I mean, you've had elements of this sort of personal pain in other films before, from Miyazaki's other films, and even from other directors in Studio Ghibli, like with When Marnie Was There. Although this film is more overt in grief and how it affects people. Like with Mahito, we see early on that he's stricken with sorrow from the fact that his mother's passed away. We see that he's not really fitting well with his school life, even to the point where he deliberately harms himself with a stone on the side of his face, causing a lot of bleeding, and he maintains an injury throughout the rest of the film. And I suppose when the Heron offers the potential to have Mahito meet his mother again, I suppose you could interpret that as a form of bargaining in regards to the grief process. But of course, it eventually all culminates into acceptance, as the themes of grief would go. Other themes I've noticed in this film, and I don't think I'm the only one to pick this up, there's a lot of similarities between this story and Dante's Inferno. For the uninformed, Dante's Inferno sees Dante imagining himself wandering around a dark forest looking for his beloved Beatrice. He meets his poet inspiration Virgil, who tells him, I know where your beloved is, but in order to get to her, we need to go through the 9 levels of hell, and then through its center, and then up the mountain of purgatory, and then to the 9 levels of heaven. And Virgil acts as the guide for Dante as they go through each level, explaining what they all represent, about the worst possible attributes of humanity, followed by what humanity is capable of, followed by the best attributes of what people are capable of, with the highest peak of all existence being love. With Dante's Inferno, I can imagine like the end point of Mahito trying to find his mother figure. That could represent Dante trying to find Beatrice, and the love that this mother figure offered, or mother figures, if you know what I mean, could be interpreted as love. And of course, the Heron is the Virgil figure by this kind of analysis. This may seem kind of odd to compare because the Heron is not present in the boy's entire journey, but nevertheless, the Heron does initiate the journey. He welcomes the boy. He does lead him to the tunnel, which even has this sort of title on, the sort of Latin title on the door, very similar to the title that's on Hell's Gate in Dante's Inferno. I mean, obviously there's some creative differences, but there's still some similarities there. And the Heron, who is the Virgil figure, says, I'll be your guide. And throughout various segments of the story, the Heron does act as the Virgil guide to Mahito's journey. So there's definitely a lot of similarities. And I suppose with this film, I can see elements of both heaven and hell at play, with a similar concept to Pixar's Soul being at play, with these really adorable white puffy things that float up in order to be born, so to say. We see these pelicans being forced to feed on innocent things in order to survive, not because they want to, but because they kind of have to, and this one pelican insists on being put out of its misery. The parakeets were the funniest parts of the film. I'm pretty convinced that the parakeets had walking lessons from the Ministry of Silly Walks from Monty Python's Flying Circus. It's the way their eyes are expressed and the way they walk. It's just so funny. Like, even just the way they look and the way they act, it's just so funny. Like, several times when they just walking in their goofy way, I could hear several people in the audience just let out a laugh or a snicker. It's just such a unique charm about them. And of course, Miyazaki being Miyazaki, he's not afraid to get a little bit disturbing when he wants to. And there's that element as seen in some of his other films, especially from Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke, where you have combined elements of the charming and the disturbing with the kind of imagery that the Heron portrays, like the way the teeth are protruding, but this, like sometimes it can look kind of disturbing, but on other times it looks really goofy, with the way the eyes kind of stick out. It's kind of a unique mixture. And something really charming to that. The characters are all likable in their own regards. You've got the Heron, who's kind of a jerk, but does eventually warm up to Mahito. I've noticed, is it just me, or does Mahito not talk too much throughout the movie, which makes the scenes where he does talk a bit more striking, as it were? Am I the only one who noticed that? You have this girl who has these fire powers, and without giving too much away, there's some implications of time travel and the potential to open up different dimensions. So it would be cool to say that she's opened up some kind of dimension from somewhere, but I'm not gonna give it away. You've got Mark Hamill as the tired old person, and don't worry, this isn't another case of Jake Skywalker. You've got really imaginative concepts. You've got places of chaos and places of absolute peace, which build up to big moments of big decisions. You've got aspects of dreams. There's quite a lot, and it's all illustrated in this kind of surreal journey that you would see in a children's illustrated book, or even one of those wordless picture books you would often see. This kind of surreal imagery, which is very striking. And again, Miyazaki's ability of having this unique ambience, which all plays into Miyazaki's use of the term ma, definitely adds to the atmosphere. Miyazaki is a master of the Japanese term ma, which can mean nothing or stillness. I would refer to it as stillness. Miyazaki referred to ma as the space between clapping. Miyazaki said, if you have constant clapping, there's no time to breathe, but if you allow time for spaces, you got more time to breathe. And Miyazaki is definitely the kind of director who's able to have a slow pace, and yet you're still invested, because Miyazaki has this ability to have a slow pace, but have it in such a way in which the story is still progressing, and that the characters are still growing, and that there's still something to grab your attention. It's never a waste of time. It's not like that Oscar snub, Mr. Turner, where it's slow-paced for the sake of being artistic, but not actually making much progress on making an actual point. And it's not slow-paced in the fact that it's having too much exposition, far from it. I'd say this is a good pace. A very atmospheric pace. And I can trust Miyazaki in regards to pacing. Although, with that said, people have often said that not all Japanese films, but certainly a lot of them, seem to have this attribute to kind of cut abruptly at the end. It's not that The Boy and the Heron doesn't have a good climax, it's just that maybe there should have been a bit more time for things to sink in before concluding. So overall, I would say that The Boy and the Heron does have a few flaws, but I would absolutely say yes, The Boy and the Heron is absolutely worth your time. The reason why it took me so long to actually watch it was because release dates seem to have a funny thing in regards to the UK compared to the rest of the world. Not to mention, I've only been able to see The Boy and the Heron locally in Inverness in very recent days. I think for now, I'm going to give The Boy and the Heron a solid 10 out of 12. There's a few flaws, and I think it's probably worth watching the film again just to let some of these themes really marinate in my head. But apart from that, this is a very fascinating exploration of grief done in a very imaginatively surreal way that arguably only Miyazaki could pull off well. And I look forward to whatever else Miyazaki has up his sleeves, as it were. Who knows, maybe he'll make something that will be also imaginative, but hey, only time will tell. Anyway, what did you think of The Boy and the Heron? Let me know in the comments down below, and please subscribe and like if you want more content like this. In the meantime, Scott Stinker signing out. Mark? That would be interesting.
What's your name?
How do you do? My name is Calum. What's your name?